Hi, everybody. VPartySports here for the VPartySports podcast, sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose. Come by on Sundays and mention the podcast that you heard on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter and receive 10% off your bill on Sunday ticket. Lots of NBA, NCAA basketball, NHL to go over. We start with the NFL first, however. We're waiting for our guest, Doug Plank, to come in. Last night, the Tennessee Titans beat the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau 27-17. Tennessee now 7-3, Green Bay 4-7. Ryan Tannehill came off the deck, 333 yards passing, 87 rushing yards for Derrick Henry, 45 receiving yards, a 3-yard touchdown pass. He also had a rushing touchdown. 2 touchdowns for Austin Hooper, 111 yards for 111 yards receiving for Boyles in the Tennessee win. They go to 7-3. They're 5-1 on the road. They are 5-1 against the spread on the road as well too. So very interesting night for the Green Bay Packers. 4-7. The playoffs are slipping away. Rodgers had 227 yards and 2 touchdowns. They only rushed for 56 yards, and that's with Aaron Jones, the 5th leading rusher in the NFL. He only had 42 yards rushing. Christian Watson, who's come into his own a little bit, 2 touchdowns receiving. The Titans, as we said, now 7-3. They're 4-2 on the road, but they're 8-2 against the spread and 5-1 on the road against the spread. The only loss that they had, which they covered, was the game 2 weeks ago against Kansas City. So what does that mean now, standings-wise? Well, Tennessee 7-3. They have a 2-game lead over the Indianapolis Colts, who are 4-5-1. Jacksonville and Houston in that division, they're long out of it. As far as the overall playoff standings, they are the number 3 seed behind Kansas City, who plays on Sunday night. Miami has a bye this week, and then Tennessee, and they are tied at 7-3 apiece. Miami has the tiebreaker right now based on strength of victory. And then Baltimore at 6-3. They'll play this weekend coming off their bye. They've got the Carolina Panthers. So it's all jumbled up. The Jets are at 6-3 in the 5th spot. Buffalo 6-3 in the 6th spot. New England in the 7th spot, 5-4. So the Tennessee Titans, who I just can't figure it out about the Tennessee Titans. Every once in a while, they come out and look like dog meat, and then they come out and play well. Certain games, they just don't have the offense. They're a very physical team. They go after it, and they went after it in the snow last night. Usually a team from the AFC South doesn't go into Lambeau with the snow that they have, but they've got a running game. They're physical, and they went after it last night, and they beat up on the Green Bay Packers last night. Green Bay now 4-7. As we look at the standings for them, they are way back in the division as far as the NFC North goes. 4-7, 8-1 for the Minnesota Vikings, who play Dallas this weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the scenario goes out for Green Bay. They're still in it playoff-wise. Have to see where they are playoff-wise. They are in the 11th spot. They're behind Arizona, Atlanta, and Washington. Washington in the 8th spot. San Francisco holds the 7th spot right now. So with that being said, Green Bay, pretty much the division's over. Playoffs are questioned. What do you do if you're Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers? Do you start Jordan Love? They're not mathematically eliminated yet, but it'll be interesting to see what they do from that standpoint. All right, Vasi VParty here with you on the VPartySports podcast, sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio. Don't forget to join us live on Sundays at 9:30 Pacific time for live broadcasts, a continuation of Week 11 of the NFL. You mentioned you heard the podcast, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Mention the podcast, you get 10% off. We're going to take a quick break right now. I'm going to try and do some producing here. We got a guest scheduled, so I'm going to try and get Doug Plank in here real quick to talk a little more NFL football in depth as before we preview the games. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll just go on with it. But Vasi VParty here with you on a Friday. Don't forget, if you missed any of this, including the worldwide famous, never duplicated Best Bets segment, you can catch it again at 6 o'clock Eastern on the replay on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. Back in 3 minutes, hopefully with a guest. If not, we'll continue on. Vasi VParty and the VPartySports podcast, brought to you by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio. All right, welcome back to the VPartySports podcast. Vasuvada Party here, sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose. Check them out for happy hour specials, live music, DJ, get your NBA, NHL, college sports action all taken care of. Thanks to everybody on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. We just went through the Packers game with the Titans yesterday. Tennessee with the 3-point underdog, the victory outright, 27-17. Derrick Henry threw for a touchdown. He ran for a touchdown. He also caught a couple passes for 45 yards. The wide receivers, Tannehill, 333 yards. And it was Trey Burks, not Bucks, Burks. These producers, meaning me. Trey Burks, 111 yards receiving. Austin Hooper, the tight end, who was with Atlanta for a few years and then Cleveland. He's at Tennessee now. He had 2 touchdowns. And then Ryan Tannehill, who usually rushes for a little bit more than he did. He had -3 yards, and that's for 3 kneel downs. And so good for the Tennessee Titans. 7-3 on the year, 8-2 against the spread, 4-2 on the road, which is going to be big in the playoffs unless you get the number 1 seed, and 5-1 against the spread in the NFL this year. All right, we move on. You get the ticker at the bottom with the early game lines going on. We'll get to them in a second. Don't forget, we'll have our best bet segment down the road. Wanted to throw a little note out here. The NBA and the NHL are all going. College basketball is starting their season. Early games coming up right now in terms of college basketball. But the thing about college basketball versus college football is unbelievable. Is how many games are actually meaningful games. Like I watched Gonzaga and Michigan State play last week in the USS Abraham. Those are 2 top 25 teams. Michigan State played Kentucky. It was a great game. Duke played Kansas. I wonder what college football is going to be able to do with that. I just don't understand what college football is going to be able to do with that from the standpoint of they got preseason games that come in and they don't mean anything. You get the Cupcake City, as Dick Vitale calls them, in college basketball. You just don't play each other until you get to like week 4 of conference play. And then by then, teams are either out of it or already established themselves in it. So it's interesting to see how that goes. But college football is where we're going to go next because of the way the games are set up. There's a couple of games this weekend in the top 25 where they're going up against Cupcakes in anticipation of their meaningful games, rivalry games the following weekend. All right, just trying to get our guest here. So if my thoughts are a little scattered right now, it's because I'm trying to figure this out. Tulane at number 21 beat SMU 59-24. They easily covered the 3.5. SMU had some offense going there, but it was all Tulane, number 21. They're 9-2 now in the rankings. They played that game in New Orleans last night at Yulman Stadium. It was a big blowout for Tulane. Meanwhile, number 1 Georgia will go into Kentucky. They're a 23-point favorite, 48.5. Ohio State at number 2, 27.5 with Maryland, 63.5. Michigan at number 3, ahead of those two matching up next weekend on Thanksgiving Saturday. 17.5-point favorite versus Illinois, 41.5. TCU, by the way, TCU, amongst all the top 25 teams, they've beaten 4 top 25 teams this year. So they're very well deserved of their number 4 ranking. They're 2.5-point favorite at Baylor. Tennessee -22 at South Carolina, 66 the total. LSU has got University of Alabama, Birmingham. This is in anticipation for their game next week with Texas A&M. They're 15-point favorite. UAB is pretty good. LSU doesn't score very much. At least they didn't score last week against Arkansas on the road. USC at number 7 will play number 16, UCLA. They're a 2-point favorite on the road. How about that total? 76.5 for USC and UCLA. Talk about no defense. It's going to be interesting to see what goes on in the Rose Bowl tomorrow night. UCLA coming off that upset versus Arizona. USC, their only loss to Utah, number 10, as we get to the next round of games here in the top 25. Alabama versus Austin Peay. Come on. I know you got Auburn, you got the Iron Bowl. This is the tune-up for them going into that game as well, too. But, geez, Austin Peay for crying out loud. Clemson, 19-point favorite over Miami in the ACC for number 9 Clemson, 48 the total. Clemson's defense has been on a roll. Miami's just had a terrible year. Mario Cristobal's first year after leaving Oregon, but boy, they just went down the tank this year, did the University of Miami. Number 10, Utah, another Pac-12 game against Oregon. That's going to be a good game. Oregon, with that loss to Washington last week, dropped all the way down to number 12. People have them maybe winning outright and then winning the Pac-12 game and possibly getting into a Final Four seed. That's going to be tough with the 4 teams that are there now. TCU, we said, is at Baylor. Georgia's at Kentucky. That should be a win. Ohio State and Maryland, that should be a win too, though Maryland's pretty tough. Michigan has Illinois. Illinois' offense struggles, but they were in the top 25 before. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But number 10, Utah, a favorite. One loss by Oregon, and all of a sudden Utah is a road favorite against Oregon. Penn State, 18.5 at Rutgers, 45 the total. UNC minus 21 versus Georgia Tech, 63 the total. UNC can score defensively. This 21 points might be a lot, but we'll see how that goes. Mississippi, Lane Kiffin coming off an up and down type of last few weeks. A 2.5-point favorite at Arkansas. Arkansas's defense played very well against LSU last week. 65 the total, so maybe that might be a little high based on Arkansas's defense last week. K-State at West Virginia at number 15, 7.5-point favorite. Adrian Martinez, the transfer from Nebraska. They're still in it Big 12-wise. We'll get to all the machinations of the standings and all the meaningful games on the college football preview show tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. We'll have that for you as well. But moving on to the top 25, Washington coming off that big win over Oregon. They're hosting Colorado. 30.5-point favorite for Colorado. 63 for Washington over Colorado. 63 the total. They can put points on the board. Colorado's had a tough time scoring this year. In fact, USC, they gave USC a little trouble in the first half, but USC ended up covering a 34-point spread in Los Angeles last week. Notre Dame, this has been the team that's been up and coming the last few weeks. They got that win at Clemson. They got that win versus Clemson. They got that win at Syracuse. They're a 20.5-point favorite versus Boston College, 43 the total. Florida State, at number 19, they've been up and coming as well, too. They've got Louisiana Lafayette, ULL, 52 the total, laying 24 points for Florida State out of the ACC. Central Florida Golden Knights, number 20. They've got the early game tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern against Navy. So you know the Navy guys will be up and early. They're up and early every day. So this time change for games is not going to affect them. 11 o'clock Eastern time. 53 the total, UCF 16 at home. Oklahoma, this is the first top 25 team that's an underdog that we'll get to in a second. Oklahoma State at number 22 is a 7-point underdog versus Oklahoma. 67 the total. It's Bedlam. It's a primetime game. Usually it's an early morning game. The Texas State Fair, they'll play that. They'll play that in the Cotton Bowl. Oklahoma, Texas, they'll play that in Norman this year, actually. They're going to be in Norman this year. 7-point favorite. Oklahoma State at number 22 had a rough start defensively for about a 3-week period. Lost their ranking all the way down from number 8. I'm thinking of Oklahoma, Texas. That's the Cotton Bowl where they play at. 67 the total. Oregon State at number 23, 7.5 at Arizona State. Not a lot to play for other than pride for Oregon State. They've had a good year. Jonathan Smith's a very good coach. Arizona State, all the turmoil they've had. Here's the second top 25 team that's an underdog. Louisville, a 4-point favorite coming off their loss to Clemson versus North Carolina State. The total 44.5. That ACC matchup. Of course, North Carolina State started off hot, lost their quarterback midway through the year, and they've had a tough time scoring since then. We'll have all the previews, as we said. We'll get to the best bets in terms of these games tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. All right, last one in the top 25. Cincinnati, minus 17. They're still playing for the American Conference title. They're at number 25. They've lost to Central Florida, so they lose the tiebreaker from that standpoint at Temple. 51 the total. All right, NCAA wrapped up. We'll hit a little bit of the NBA. We'll get to the NFL in a second. We can try and see if Doug Plank is going to come on or not. If not, then we'll just have him on another time. But the college football wrapped up for right now. Lots of top 25 games tonight. As far as games that are going on tonight, South Florida and Tulsa. Tulsa, 14-point favorite versus South Florida. 3-7 for Tulsa, 1-9 for South Florida. San Diego State still playing for a lot in the Mountain West. They have a 6-4 record. They're 4-2 overall in the Mountain West, and they are looking to upend Fresno State, who has a 5-1 record. San Diego State lost to Fresno State, so it's going to be tough for them to catch up. They're going to have 2 wins, and Fresno State's going to have 2 losses for them to get the Western Conference. But they've got a road game at New Mexico, 14-point favorite. The total at 36. So it'll be interesting to see what San Diego State team shows up. They don't score a lot. They give up a few points on defense. They don't give up a lot of points on defense. In fact, New Mexico only scores about 11.5 points a game, 14.7 a game. The team rankings, the Fire Center, the Pick Center, has them at 11.5 points for today. All right, so those are the two college games for today. Not really a top 25. We told you about Tulane. They were the only game yesterday, and of course the MAC, they play on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. There's some ramifications for that as well. We'll get to that next week. All right, when we come back, we'll try and get Doug Plank on. If not, we'll go to the NFL and NBA. A lot of college basketball to talk about as well too. The VPartySports podcast. Vasi Vadaparty, your host here. Back with you in 1 minute. Okay, welcome back to the VPartySports podcast. Vasi Vadaparty here. Let's hit the NFL games. We're just going to do a little capsulized version. We'll have a full preview on Sunday on our live broadcast from the Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose. Come down if you're in the area. 10% off your entire bill, including alcohol. If you have if you mention the podcast to the staff there, live at the Brit, 9:30 Pacific time. Of course, you can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. All right, NFL games that we're going to. Baltimore leading the AFC North. They're 6-3. Lamar Jackson is sick, but John Harbaugh says he's going to play. 41 the total versus Carolina at home. Buffalo, after that loss last week to Minnesota, an 8-point favorite over Cleveland. 42 the total. Deshaun Watson 2 weeks away from playing. Josh Allen, too many interceptions in the red zone. He did have 3 touchdowns. They're in third in the AFC East. They're in 6th overall in the playoff standing. For a team that was thought to be going to the Super Bowl, they are having a rough time right now in terms of their standing. So Philadelphia 7 at Indianapolis. How about that? Nick Sirianni leading his team. They were undefeated going into last week. Washington Commanders beat them. 7-point favorite into Indy. Matt Ryan, Jonathan Taylor back. They got a win against Las Vegas last week. 44.5 the total there. But it's his first game back in Indianapolis since he left as the defensive coordinator from the Colts. So they're going to go in 8-1 record. They're only a game ahead of the Giants, 2 games ahead of the Cowboys. Washington, the Commanders, off their win last week, the 3-point favorite to Houston, 41 the total. Taylor Heineke 3-1 in his role as the starting quarterback. The Jets and the Patriots. Patriots are 3-point favorite, 37.5. The Jets in second place, 5th overall in the AFC at 6-3. Patriots are 5-4, 3-point favorite. Belichick has usually had his way with the Jets over the years, but this is a different Jets team. They've got a pass rush, and you got to see how good Mac Jones is going to handle this pressure by Robert Saleh and his defensive staff. All right, speaking of those Giants, only a 3-point favorite. They're not getting a lot of respect points-wise. The Detroit Lions are not exactly world beaters. They have won 2 in a row. They're 3-6. They beat Green Bay 2 weeks ago. They beat Chicago last weekend. They're a 3-point underdog in New York, 45 the total. Defense for the New York Giants right now. They've only scored 187 points and given up 173, but they are 4-1 at home. They've got Daniel Jones going, Saquon Barkley second in the NFL in rushing, a 3-point favorite. They held Houston to a fumble and an interception in the red zone, so they didn't give up any points there, and so the defense has come through. A loss by Philadelphia at Indianapolis, which could happen, and a win by the Giants would equal that record at 8-2. Now, Philadelphia has already beaten them, so they'll have the advantage as far as the tiebreaker goes. But that NFC East race is not over by any means, and Dallas 6-3 in that scenario as well too. They're 2 games back as we go into the weekend. New England and the Jets, the Giants and Detroit, the Saints 3.5-point favorites over the Rams. What's happened to the Super Bowl champs? Don't know, but they're just not running the ball. They're not pass rushing. Stafford's had a bad year. They had to go with Woodford last week. He was injured. It's going to be an interesting scenario for the Rams and the Saints. 3.5-point favorite for the Saints. Don't know who they're going to start with, if they're going to go with Andy Dalton or not. Kamara's still there. He's their leading playmaker, obviously. The Atlanta Falcons are a 3-point favorite over the Chicago Bears. My Chicago Bears gave it up again late last week. They had the lead. Justin Fields has been incredible the last 3 weeks. You take Miami, you take Detroit, you take the Atlanta Falcons. Don't exactly stop a lot of people either. So he's been great defensively from that standpoint. 3-point underdog in Atlanta. Cordell Patterson back for the Falcons. They're playing for a lot as well too. They're only a game back of Tampa Bay in the NFC South. Tampa Bay has a bye week this week, but if they can get to 5-6 and Tampa Bay coming off that bye week, they'll probably win the division. Atlanta will have a tough time making the playoffs. So the NFC South division is really the only way that they can go. Mariota has had an okay year, but their running game is outstanding. They're 4th in the NFL in rushing this year. So if they can run the ball on Chicago's had a tough time stopping the run. Their pass rush has been pretty good, so hopefully they can get to Mariota. Secondary has been really good this year, but it's hard to say that when you're giving up all the points you're giving. So that's where we're at in terms of the NFL for the early games. Let's go to the late games. How about this? Now, here's an interesting scenario. The Dallas Cowboys are 6-3. They're going to Minnesota. I know they had the win last year with Cooper Rush at quarterback after Prescott got hurt. They are going into the 8-1 Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota Vikings are 8-1. They just beat the Buffalo Bills last week on the road, coming back from a 27-10 deficit. Minnesota is an underdog at home. Tell me what 8-1 team is an underdog to the Dallas Cowboys. I understand it's brand. Sportsbook guys know what they're doing. But Minnesota to be a 1-point underdog, 47.5 the total. Minnesota's going to have to run the ball. I know they play a lot of close games, but this is one for Minnesota. They beat Buffalo last week, and Josh Allen played. So they're for real, and they're 8-1. But I cannot figure out how the Minnesota Vikings are a 1-point underdog. Cincinnati at Pittsburgh. Cincinnati 4 at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh had their win against New Orleans last week. They play well as a home dog. Joe Burrow's been sacked a ton. Mixon hasn't had the same year as he's had last year. They don't have Jamar Chase still, so they're going to have to rely on their other receivers and a little bit more of Mixon to be active for Cincinnati. This game got flexed out of Sunday night for Kansas City and the Chargers. All right, Denver lost at Vegas a few weeks back. They have the Raiders again this week, 3-point favorite. They don't give up very many points, but they don't score a lot of points either. 41 the total. The Raiders at 2-7. Denver at 3-6. The division pretty much lost as Kansas City's leading the way at 7-2. Meanwhile, speaking of Kansas City, how about that performance by Patrick Mahomes? The rest of the team didn't look all that great, but 4 touchdowns for Patrick Mahomes. They beat up on the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you had Jacksonville plus 10, KC minus 10, you got lucky and you pushed. If you had them at 9.5, where I saw it ended up, you lost out from that standpoint. So a 6-point favorite at the Chargers. And let me put a kibosh on all those people that are saying Justin Herbert isn't elite. Justin Herbert does not have Keenan Allen, does not have Mike Williams, has a half-healthy offensive line. Defensive backs are injured all over. They've got so many injuries. The fact that they even competed with the 49ers last Sunday should tell you something all about Justin Herbert, because without him, that would have been a total blowout on Sunday Night Football. 6-point favorite for Kansas City. They've had close games with Kansas City. 51 the total. They did cover in Kansas City with that last-second touchdown. That was when Justin Herbert got hit in the ribs. He was able to recover from that and able to play the following weeks, but he's a lot healthier now. And then Monday night, we'll talk about this on Monday on the podcast at 4 o'clock Eastern. San Francisco going to Mexico City. It's an Arizona Cardinals home game. They're going to be favored by 8, 43.5 for the 49ers, who come off their win versus the Chargers last week. Arizona, their victory over the Rams last week. We'll delve into that on Monday as well, too. But the NFL lines, as we have, Baltimore, Carolina, Buffalo, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Indianapolis, Washington, Houston, the Jets, and the Patriots. The Giants and the Lions, the Saints and the Rams, and the Falcons and the Bears. Meanwhile, the afternoon games, Dallas, Minnesota, the big game there, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, an AFC North battle there for years. Denver and the Raiders, AFC West, we know about that. Sunday night, the other AFC West teams, KC and the Chargers go. And then Monday night, the NFC West, 49ers and the Cardinals go at it there. So you see the lines going across the bottom there. The NFL has it all set up for Week 11. Let's go through the standings here while I have the lines going across. Miami leads the Jets by a game and Buffalo by a game. 7-3, 6-3, and 6-3 for the Jets and Buffalo. Patriots are 5-4. They're over 500. Both the East divisions of both conferences are over 500. The NFC East, Philadelphia 8-1, 7-2 for the Giants, 6-3 Dallas, 5-5 Washington. Now it gets a little tricky. Baltimore 6-3, Cincinnati 5-4 in the AFC North. Cleveland and Pittsburgh are out of it. They're 3-6. Tennessee 2 games up on Indianapolis. The Colts are 4-5-1. Meanwhile, the Titans are 7-3 after their win last night at Green Bay. In the AFC West, Kansas City, it's 7-2 record over the Chargers. 2 games up. They have the tiebreaker in hand with the head-to-head victory. This weekend will go a long way if Kansas City can win. Pretty much clinch the division for the Chiefs. Denver and the Raiders, they play each other. They're both out of it. The Raiders have blown leads in 3 straight games. In the NFC, the North, the Vikings have clinched the North pretty much. They're 8-1. Green Bay 4-7. Detroit 3-6. And the Bears 3-7. Tampa Bay 5-5. 1 game better than Atlanta. 2 games better than Carolina and New Orleans. But do we really think Carolina or New Orleans has a shot with 7 losses? Seattle and San Francisco both have 4 losses. San Francisco 5-4. Seattle with their bye this week at 6-4. If San Francisco wins, they will overtake the Seahawks in first place by virtue of head-to-head. And then Arizona and the Rams 4-6 and 3-6. Arizona hosts San Francisco. The Rams will travel to New Orleans. All right, so those are your standings. Wild card wise, right now it's Kansas City, Miami, Tennessee, Baltimore, the division leaders. Buffalo, New England, and the Jets, Buffalo, and New England, 5, 6, and 7. Chargers still in it. Bengals still in it. Colts still in it. After that, it's 3 and 6 teams. In the National Football Conference, the NFC, both the Eagles and Vikings are 8-1. Eagles walloped Minnesota in week 2, so they have the head-to-head tiebreaker. But both are 8-1. Anything can happen there for the top spot in the NFC. Seattle at 6-4 has the 3 seed. Tampa Bay has the 4 seed at 5-5. The Giants have a better record than both of them, 7-2, as does Dallas, who's 6-3. San Francisco has the 7th spot; they're 5-4. The Washington Commanders are 5-5, and then you got Atlanta and Arizona 4-6, Green Bay 4-7, and so on down. Detroit, the Rams, Carolina, the Saints, and then the Chicago Bears are actually 16th in the NFC by virtue of all the tiebreakers they lose. So another number 1 draft pick maybe for the Chicago Bears. But Justin Fields has been great. I'm sticking to my team as we go from there. All right, when we take a break, we'll come back with a little NBA, NCAA action and close out. This is the VPartySports podcast. Don't forget our best bet segment also for today. Sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio. 10% off your entire bill if you mention the podcast on Sunday during NFL Sunday Ticket. Back with you in 30 seconds for the final segment of the VPartySports podcast. All right, welcome back to the V Party Sports Podcast, sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio. Come down on Sunday, see our live broadcast. Mention the podcast, and you receive 10% off your bill during the NFL Sunday Ticket. Don't forget to check them out during the week for happy hour specials, DJ music, and all your NBA, NHL, college sports action. All right, meanwhile, we get to the NBA. Let's get to the NBA here because we have them. There we go. Washington Wizards, a 6-point favorite over the Miami Heat, 216 the total. Philadelphia, 1.5-point favorite over Milwaukee. Milwaukee's injury riddled, 211 the total. Cavaliers, 9.5 versus the Charlotte Hornets, 220.5. Indiana Pacers playing a little bit better, 220, 236.5 the total. Pacers a 5-point road favorite at Houston, who's just been awful this year. Memphis, a 6-point favorite over Oklahoma City. The Oklahoma City Thunder, red hot. They're covering everywhere. They may not be great record-wise, but the win they had against Washington the other day, down 17, came back out of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, three-pointer to win. A 6-point underdog, 230 the total there. Bulls, 9-point favorite over Orlando, 221 the total there. Orlando themselves a tough time. Dallas, 9-point favorite. No Nikola Jokic yet. He's still in protocol, health and safety protocol. 216 the total. They lost to the Knicks the other night without him. Boston, a 2.5-point favorite at New Orleans. Check the injury report. Zion Williamson didn't play the other night against Memphis. They still got to win. But if he's back, 230 the total there for the Boston Celtics, who are playing really well. Phoenix at Utah. Phoenix, a 2-point favorite on the road at Utah after their win over Golden State. Utah started off the year really well. 229 the total. And then Golden State, 7.5 over the Knicks. They got blown out. They're still winless on the road, but they are 6-1 at home. The Lakers, a 7-point favorite over the Pistons, 226. Pistons played the Clippers tough last night in Los Angeles. They're going back-to-back in the NBA tonight. So very interesting NBA setup tonight. Let's go through some college basketball games here real quick. One thing I like about college basketball, I said at the beginning, teams will play each other, unlike college football, where they don't start playing each other. A lot of cupcakes beforehand. So Baylor, West Virginia, that could be a Sweet 16 matchup. 4.5-point favorite for Baylor over Virginia. Davidson and South Carolina. Davidson, a 2-point favorite over South Carolina. What used to be a good football rivalry in the ACC and the Big East, Florida State in the SEC, and the ACC, 7.5-point favorite for Florida, 144.5. Michigan State, how about their schedule? They've already played Gonzaga. They played Kentucky. Now they're going to play Villanova tonight. They're a 6.5-point favorite, 130.5 for Villanova. Villanova lost to Temple, surprisingly, but those Big Five teams in Philadelphia, they play each other very tough. So Villanova, 130.5, 6.5-point underdog. Loyola Chicago, just heard that they're moving to the A10, 1.5-point favorite versus Boise State, 125.5. And then two top 20 teams, UCLA, a 3.5-point favorite versus Illinois. UCLA at number 8, Illinois at 19, 145 the total there. All right. Tomorrow on the NCAA college football preview, we'll go through each conference as well as recap the top 25 games as well. All right. The never duplicated, world famous best bet segment for today. Don't have any college football for you today, but in the NBA, 76ers -1.5 over the Milwaukee Bucks. They're on ESPN tonight. 76ers starting to round into form. I think they're going to get the Bucks tonight, who've been injury riddled. Warriors, we just told you they play well at home. They've got the Knicks, who came off the victory, 2 victories in a row, actually. They beat Utah and they beat Denver in the road at Salt Lake City and at Denver. It's going to be interesting to see how they come out and play. Usually, this is the third game on the road for any NBA team, is usually where they start to falter. So I'm going to give the Warriors a 7.5, give the Knicks a 7.5, take the Warriors. The Utah Jazz +2 at home against Phoenix. I know Phoenix played very well, but boy, the Jazz at home getting points the way they started, I'm going to go with the Jazz. And then finally in the NBA, Cavaliers and Hornets over 220.5. Charlotte can score. Cavaliers have put some points on the board. They've gotten some good play from Donovan Mitchell. Evan Mobley has been outstanding in the middle. So those are your 4 NBA games for today. Best bets in college. Again, they play each other. Indiana, 2.5 points over Xavier. Baylor, 4.5 points over Virginia. Villanova, I'm taking Villanova plus the 6.5 over Michigan State. UCLA laying the 3.5 to Illinois. Rutgers -5. That game's going to start in about 20 minutes. And then the College of Charleston. They're playing in Charlotte right now, a 1-point underdog. They're going to be playing where are they? Got it right here. They're going to be playing Colorado State, who's gotten off to a good start. Colorado State 4-0. They're a 1-point favorite. However, the game being played, Shriners Children's Classic in Charleston. So give the advantage to the College of Charleston there at +1. All right, those are your best bet segment. College football preview tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Don't forget the replay of this show at 6 o'clock Eastern if you missed any of it, especially the world-famous, never-duplicated best bet segment. And, of course, on Sunday at the Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose, 9:30 Pacific time. We'll be there live. The first half hour, the sound will be inside. And then the next half hour will be online right here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Thanks to everybody on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for joining us. I'm Vasi Vadaparty. That is the VPartySports podcast for today. Enjoy. We will talk to you soon. Take care. Have a good Friday afternoon.